Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party in the UK. Take a look at his reaction and what he's doing in terms of addressing the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So he's warned Labour members of Parliament that they will be kicked out of the party for attacking NATO. Yes, you heard that right. Let me play you this clip of him on TV talking about that.
Yesterday was significant in Parliament because all political parties spoke with one voice in our support for Ukraine and our support for NATO. In relation to these sanctions, I thought what the government put forward earlier this week was not strong enough. They came forward yesterday with a stronger package, and I was able to say that we, the opposition, will support those further sanctions. I do want to go further. I think that we do need further financial restrictions, particularly the SWIFT mechanism. I also think that we've got to break open the shell companies that we have here in the UK that are providing financial support for Putin.
So that's just Starmer being Starmer. You can see the point here is that he toes the exact same line as the Tories, for example, right? The Conservative party who's in power in the UK. Indistinguishable from any other EU state, member state, or the US. And so just going back to the to this article here from the Mirror, they're saying that Keir Starmer has warned Labour MPs they will be kicked out of the party if they attack NATO. The opposition leader said MPs who draw a quote-unquote false equivalence between Vladimir Putin's Russia and the defensive alliance would have no place in the party. Does this remind you of something? Does this remind you of something? Anyone who criticizes the Israelis has no place in the party, right? The same words they use. No place in the party. That's what happens when you're pro-Palestinian. They do a Corbyn. They Corbyn you, right? Like they went after Jeremy Corbyn or Chris Williamson and many others. The speech at a meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party tonight comes after 11 backbenchers who signed a letter slamming NATO's eastward expansion U-turned when they were threatened with suspension last week. Again, so let me translate. There are 11 members of Parliament in the Labour Party who signed a letter condemning NATO. Sir Keir told MPs, again, Starmer's been knighted, they call him Sir Keir. We rightly spend a lot of time talking about the creation of the NHS, but one of the other great achievements of the post-war Labour government was the foundation of NATO. Oh yeah, because, just like bombing children in Afghanistan is the same thing as giving people universal healthcare. Wow. Talk about false fucking equivalences. Jesus Christ. Like, this is who we're dealing with. This is the opposition in the UK. Do you understand the state of affairs? It's like Democrats in the US, just completely useless. Completely useless. He says Labour's commitment to democracy, the rule of law, and the sovereignty of independent nations is unshakable. Vladimir Putin is attacking all those things. NATO is defending them. Again, they talk about democracy, rule of law. Keir Starmer, who's saying all this stuff, he called himself a Zionist without qualification. Right? So apparently, what the Israelis do to Palestinians, stealing their land, killing them, beating them, shooting them, bombing them, that's democratic, that's okay, and condemning that, you will have no place in the party. But, what Vladimir Putin is doing, that's terrible, even though, it doesn't even come close to 70 years of Israeli occupation. So again, double standards all the way through, all across the board. And they talk about democracy and the rule of law and sovereignty. Where's Palestinian sovereignty? Where's the democracy for them? They're treated not even like second class, it's like fourth class citizens. They're not even viewed as humans by the Israelis. So complete hypocrisy. It's another case of applying double standards. All of these nice buzzwords. Oh, it's international law, the rules-based order. Go fuck yourself. This is just bullshit that they use when it suits them so they can antagonize other countries. They don't actually believe in any of it. He says there are groups in this country who haven't seemed to understand that difference. Let me be very clear. There will be no place in this party for false equivalence between the actions of Russia and the actions of NATO. You know what? I agree with you because they're not comparable. They're not even close. Not even close. Russia hasn't done a fraction of what NATO has done. Not even a fraction. Okay? I'm talking about Russia post-Soviet Union. Not even a fraction. It's not even close. The group who signed the letter included a number of MPs who were frontbenchers during Corbyn's leadership. Makes sense. Richard Bergen, John McDonnell, and Diane Abbott. It also follows a row with Young Labour, the party's youth wing, over NATO, with party chiefs suspending funding for the group as a result. Yeah, so they're saying that there's going to be a rise in prices because they're hitting Russia, and that it would impact the British economy. I mean, again, do you see how they're shooting themselves in the foot? It's just one example of many that the Europeans are doing. And they're saying that, quote, "We must be clear and honest with the British people, though these sanctions will have a knock-on effect here." What did I tell you? All of Europe is going to be impacted by this, if not the world. Whether it's freezing because of gas, right? Or not now, it could be in the future. From an energy deficiency, or whether it's price hikes or inflation. There are so many repercussions, right? There's a big ripple effect that's coming, and Europeans have no clue. They turn on the television, and the newsman tells them, we have sanctions here for Mr. Vladimir Putin, the evil dictator. And then they go, yes, awesome, yes, fuck Russia. And then, when they wake up and they get fucking slapped in the face with the sanctions, it's too late. Never mind what's happening in Russia or to the countries that are actually hit with sanctions, right? The targets. It's not Vladimir Putin is feeling the sanctions, you dim-witted dunce. It's people in Russia, the civilians, who are going to feel the repercussions of sanctions, and you too. This is, you're cheering on things you don't even understand. Let me show you a clip over here. This is, hold on. This is, again, Diane Abbott. I just read to you, she signed this letter condemning NATO. Take a look at what she has to say on BBC about this. Yep.
Those of us on the left of the Labour Party will continue to speak out for peace and negotiated settlement, because that's what the people of Russia want, peace, and that's what the people of the Ukraine want, peace. And I would just point out that we're now being told on the left of the party that we can't support Stop the War. We could even support Stop the War under Tony Blair at the time of the Iraq War. So it's interesting that we can't support Stop the War now.
Are you advocating what you seemed to be saying a couple of weeks ago then, that we effectively should carve up the Ukraine and hand some of it over?
Ridiculous, Ben.
That's what you were saying last week.
No one has said that.
You say you were able to do it. What's wrong with Keir Starmer saying you can't sign up to Stop the War if what Stop the War is saying is that NATO should be the one pulling back rather than Russia?
Keir Starmer's entitled to say we can't sign up to Stop the War. All I'm saying is Tony Blair never made that stipulation. That's all I'm saying.
Christ almighty. This is my country. It stinks, doesn't it? Can you see? Do you see how they immediately jumped at her like a pack of wolves? They immediately lunged at her. But what do you mean, good madam, that you would give Ukraine to the Ruskies? No, chill the fuck out. She just said that NATO should stop expanding eastward because that caused the whole crisis. That's the fucking fact. Stop revising history. They just lunged at her immediately, right? And for those of you who don't know, Stop the War is a as the name implies, an anti-war movement. I spoke with Chris Nineham. He's from Stop the War. He helped organize those anti-Iraq war protests in 2003, which I remember as a child, right? There were huge million people in the streets of London. And so he helped organize those protests. And Stop the War Coalition is, let me try and see if I can get you the letter out here. But Christ, look at the state of the media. Oh my goodness. Like they just lunged at her. It's unbelievable. Okay, so here we have the Stop the War .org.uk. They have a march on March 6th, no pun intended. So in case you want to participate in a protest, March 6th. And this is the statement they've put out. As the clouds of war continue to gather over Ukraine, the British government, alongside the US, is ramping up the threat of war. Even the Ukrainian foreign minister is calling for calm. Yet in the most cynical move of his career so far, Boris Johnson has used the threat of war to distract from the implosion of his premiership. The government is using the crisis as an opportunity to prove itself as America's most loyal European ally. This is in stark contrast to other European countries, France and Germany. That's a bit outdated now, after they sent weapons, who are keen to see a diplomatic solution prevail rather than a new European war. The British media, in its usual gung-ho fashion, has barely mentioned the concerted efforts of our European allies to prevent war, but here we are joined by a number of experts to share an alternative view. So again, you see Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, these are the kinds of speakers who were taking part, right? And this is on 10th February, but there's going to be another thing on Sunday, March 6th. There's going to be a global day of action, okay? no to NATO expansion. This is the stuff that Stop the War do. They always engage in direct action. I told you the protest against the war in Iraq is one of the biggest in history. I think it's the biggest in London, certainly in the last century. It's just amazing. So they're going to have an International Day of Anti-War Action on Sunday, March 6th. We call on everyone who opposes this war to take to the streets on March 6th in a massive display of global opposition to the war and the warmongers. And so people like Diane Abbott, who are, who can see clearly the bullshit that's going on, and who support Stop the War coalition, they're attacking them on BBC, on television, and then putting words in her mouth. I don't recall her ever saying that Ukraine should be carved up and given to Putin. You said that. That just came out of your mouth, not Diane Abbott's mouth. They're really something else, They're really something else. And then they're basically saying, well, why can't the Labour leader tell you not to sign that? This isn't a democracy. I love when they say the quiet part out loud, It's so telling who they are. It's so telling that the UK is, acting as a lapdog for the US. It's really not even, it's not even an exaggeration. You can see what's going on. And it's like what I just showed you earlier with the American journalists on NBC and so on who are pro-war, right? They're just marching in lockstep with the government. They have the exact same talking points. There's no difference between them and the White House or the State Department, or in this case, Whitehall or number 10, Downing Street. And so it really shows you who has the state media, because, I can go on RT right now and say whatever I like. Do you think I could go on BBC? Look what they just did to Diane Abbott. They just, they eat you alive. They try to paint you as some kind of traitor, or like you're a pro-Kremlin, or just straight up a Kremlin asset. They always go and try and attack your integrity, right? Like they'd say you're a bot, or you're a traitor, or you're a spy, or some whatever bullshit they have, but they never actually address the argument. So she's saying no NATO expansion. They didn't ask about NATO expansion. They said, are you saying Russia should carve up Ukraine? What the fuck are you smoking? That's not even the same thing. Not even the same thing at all. Ukraine could be the same way it was if the US had picked up the phone and told Zelensky, no NATO. Russia would have no fucking excuse to be in Ukraine. And again, my argument is, if you want to come here and act like Hillary Clinton, and you want to say, well, of course Putin would still be in Ukraine, right? It's Putin, not Russia. If you want to come here and insist that that's just a cover story, well, why did you give him the cover story? Why give free ammunition to Russia if you insist that they would be in Ukraine anyway? Right? Why give or dangle, let's say, because Ukraine is not a NATO member, why dangle the membership knowing full well that it's going to piss off Russia? That's a fact. That is a fact, and they all know this, and it's documented. You don't need to take my word for it. But so you see what the kind of cohesion that they're creating in the Labour Party, this kind of censorship, de facto censorship, that if you express criticism and you say nasty things about NATO, nasty things, I mean, they're just saying the truth. Your expansion is provoking other people. That's, it's a fact. If you say that, we're going to kick you out. Kick you out. And even fucking Tony Blair didn't do that when they invaded Iraq. Remember, Tony Blair, also Labour leader, and he was prime minister at the time, and he wrote in that note to George Bush, I'm with you no matter what, all the way. Right? So they just made up the evidence and they went to war together. George Bush, Tony Blair. And so she's saying even under Tony Blair, we were able to criticize the war. What does that tell you? Do you see how they're trying on every, do you see how they're trying in every imaginable way, in every domain, to shut down dissent in the political sphere, so in the Labour Party itself, in the media by banning RT, right? In, of course, the financial way. So, if you come here and say that, the Russian people shouldn't be hit with sanctions, this doesn't actually target Vladimir Putin. It doesn't matter. They're just going to screw everyone in Russia. And then even when they know it's going to impact Europe and the UK, their own people, they still want to do it, right? So they're involving everyone in this war effort and shutting down all sorts of dissent. And it's so typical of neoliberals. This is who they are. You need to get this through your head, guys. Like, I'm sure most of you already know this, but this is who the liberals are, the neoliberals in the US, in Canada, in the UK, the EU. This is their world order. It's you either shut the fuck up and you support NATO and you support our imperialism, or we will silence you, right? We'll do it with big tech. We will deplatform you online. In all of the Silicon Valley companies which we control and we dominate and whose agenda we control. And then, of course, they'll also screw you financially. I mean, that stuff with Trudeau, for example, or with Russia on an international scale. You resist, we're going to take away your access to SWIFT for many of your banks. We're going to hit you with sanctions, the central bank assets, and then we're going to also make sure that the gas companies and oil companies divest from you. I mean, this is how they do. It's bullying, censorship, financial terrorism. That's how they work. When it comes to Keir Starmer, this guy is such a typical agent of neoliberalism. And, just to remind you, there are so many draconian laws that the Tory government has passed. And he, of course, does nothing to oppose them, right? He leads Labour like it was under Blair in many ways. And the people in the Labour Party are Blairites, right? That's the whole point. It's right there in the name. And that's why they cast out people like Jeremy Corbyn as an anti-Semite, and now they're trying to do this with Diane Abbott. Oh, you're a Kremlin agent, you're pro-Russia, you're anti-NATO. They just smear you. They smear you to exclude you, to try and attack you. And this is really not what you should be doing in a so-called liberal democracy, right? They're doing everything that they accuse other countries of doing. It's complete, absolute projection on every level, right? So let that show you again that you have no real opposition in the UK. Dissent is not permitted. Criticizing NATO is not permitted, lest you be cast out as a traitor, right, or a Kremlin agent. That's the atmosphere that we're in right now, and it's permeated all over Europe, in the UK, in the US, and most of the so-called Western world.